Hello again, watch friends. Welcome back. It's been about 2 years since I received this attractive Grand Seiko SBGM021 GMT as a 25th wedding anniversary gift. In that time, I've worn it a couple of dozen times. Grand Seiko has rebranded the Grand Seiko image, so now only Grand Seiko appears on the dial, and I've become a much more knowledgeable watch collector. So I thought it might be interesting to take another look at this Grand Seiko GMT and see what I thought, given the experience I've had on the wrist. First of all, what hasn't changed is that the overall finishing, the hands, case, dial, are superb, and still are very competitive with other mid-range Swiss brands. That's what attracted me to this Grand Seiko piece, and that hasn't changed. So let's talk about the specs on this watch. It's 39.5 millimeter in diameter, 13.7 millimeters thick. You can see it's a little bit on the chunky side. Many GS automatic watches are on the thick side, something that numerous GS aficionados lament. Kind of thick for a dress watch, not overly so. Has a signed crown, the Grand Seiko logo there. The lug-to-lug distance is about 47 millimeters, not quite 47, just a shade under 47. And the lugs curve down, so it's not very long, so it fits nicely on just about any size wrist. Looking at the dial, we see it has a beautiful, creamy, ivory-colored dial. And often when you see this watch in pictures, especially on the Grand Seiko official website, the pictures just don't do it justice. You have to see this watch in person to see how really nice it looks. It's got a 72-hour power reserve. The accuracy of the movement, which is a 9S66 movement, exceeds cost specifications. And you can see the Grand Seiko logo on the bottom there. You can see the rotor has Tokyo stripes, really nicely finished. Stainless steel case. And it's 30 meter water resistant. So it's about 100 feet. Obviously not for swimming, not for showering. And I'd be even a little bit cautious about doing the dishes with this watch on my wrist. The crown is not a screw down crown, so you have to be a little bit careful, as you would with any kind of watch that has about 100 feet water resistance. The strap is a crocodile leather strap, which comes with a Grand Seiko logoed deployant clasp. Notice the Grand Seiko logo on the buckle. And interestingly, many watches that come from Japan come with the clasp side down and the tail toward the top. That's kind of opposite what most of us are used to. Notice all the hands, the hour hand, minute hand, are extremely highly polished. They have mirror surfaces, and it looks a little bit retro, I think, but in a modern sort of way. By the way, the movement includes a anti-magnetic sprung hairspring and mainspring. Sprung is a proprietary material that Seiko makes, and you can see that it's just really attractive. Notice the very nice minute track around the outer dial there. You can see the hour markers are faceted and somewhat jewel-like. Really plays off the light. And the date window is framed. And the date is actually a little bit larger, maybe 1.5 times larger than you might normally see on a watch with the date at 3 o'clock. Has a sapphire crystal, box-shaped sapphire crystal. You can see the crystal there. The crystal is coated on the inside, on the inner surface, with anti-reflective coating. Again, Seiko's own proprietary material for doing that. And as I mentioned, the exhibition case back. I'd like to explain how to use the GMT function on this watch And by the way, other GMT watches, for the most part, work in a similar way. First of all, notice the blued GMT hand. I think you can see it a little bit better. There you go. Now you can see it. It really contrasts nicely with the cream dial on this Grand Seiko. So let's say it's 10 o'clock Eastern Time, or I am in New Jersey. So I'm going to move the crown out to the second position and rotate all the dials until the blued hand, the GMT hand, points to 22. That's 2200 hours, 10 o'clock in 24-hour time. And let's say I'm going to Paris. Well, I know that Paris is 6 hours ahead. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6, depending upon daylight savings. But to make it easier, let's say it's 6 hours ahead. So I move the crown out to the first position, and I can rotate the hour hand, which notice that the second hand and minute hand don't change, so we don't want to interrupt our previously set accurate time setting. So I'm going to move the hour hand to 4 a.m. So it's 10 o'clock in the U.S. 6 hours later is 4 a.m. So I push it in. So now the way to read this is the traditional hour hand and minutes show the local time in Paris is 4 o'clock a.m. At the same time, my home time back in the U.S. is 10 o'clock p.m. or 2200 hours. Also, if let's say it's an hour later in Paris, and it's an hour later, now it's 5 a.m. in Paris, notice that the GMT hand now moved to 2300 hours, or 11 o'clock. I think it's very easy to read both the local time and the home time, or second time, with this approach. That's one way to use the watch. The other way is to set the GMT to your local time. In this example, the Paris time, and use the hour hand for the second or home time. To me, that seems a little bit confusing, maybe even backwards. I think it's easier just to glance at the watch and see what time it is where you are. And if you want to get the second time, gaze a little bit longer and look at the GMT hand. That's how you use and set a true GMT. So here it is on my wrist. You can see it looks really quite nice. And the beautiful quartz leather strap. There's the point buckle. And as I mentioned, it's the opposite direction that you normally expect. You would normally expect to have this tail pointing down the other way. The strap is a 19mm lug width, so it's a little bit more difficult to find a replacement strap, but I'm not sure why you'd want to. The strap goes very well with the dial. And of course, there's the Grand Seiko logo on the bottom and Seiko on the top. Now, Seiko has rebranded their watches, so it no longer says Seiko at the top. Now the watches
only say Grand Seiko.
The new version is the SBGM221, as opposed to this one, which is the SBGM021. Everything else is exactly the same movement inside, the same case, the same dial. The only difference is they've increased the retail price by $200. So the new version is $4,600 retail price. Such a nice watch. Love that creamy ivory dial. So what do I like about this watch? Well, it's a modern classic, I think. It's a beautiful watch, very dressy. I have worn it with casual clothes. It does work that way, but it's really not a sport watch. It's really a dress watch. I love the 24-hour time. The fact that you can see the 24-hour time on the inner dial, but it's not intrusive. It's sort of a subtle addition to the watch. And the jewel-like applied hour batons. I mean, the finishing is just incredible. The hands, the hour markers, it's just the case. It's just really, really nice. And when you wind it, it's just so buttery smooth. Of course, it's automatic, so the rotor is going to spin when you have it on your wrist and wind itself that way. What don't I like about the Grand Seiko GMT? Well, I don't like the fact that on the bottom, this is a very minor point, but see at the bottom where it says automatic in all capital letters? That's sort of, it doesn't quite fit, I don't think. I don't like the non-standard strap width of 19 millimeters. Again, that's another minor point. It's a little thick on the wrist, so it doesn't quite fit under the sleeve as well as it could. And there's no quick set date. To set the date, you have to pull the crown out to the first position, and when you move the hour hand, it then advances the date. But interestingly, when you move the hour hand, you can change the date both forward and backward. So it's not quite as annoying as some watches where it only moves forward, and if you want to change the date, you might have to go around 30 days to get to the correct date. Here you can go backwards as well. So that overcomes that minor point. So that's the Grand Seiko SBGM021. It's a really nice watch. Again, if you haven't seen Grand Seikos in person, you really need to, because until you see the quality, you feel it, you wind it, and you see it, you see how beautiful it looks, you really can't appreciate it. So after 2 years, I still like this Grand Seiko GMT very much. Not just because of the sentimental value, but also because it's simply a beautiful watch. Grand Seiko case, hands, and dial finishing are unparalleled in the sub $10,000 market. If you enjoyed this video, please click the subscribe button to be alerted of future videos. Until you return, thanks for watching.